I'm Andrea Butcher, and this is Being at Work. Being a leader is hard. So on this show, I set out to talk with experienced leaders to learn from their pivotal moments, how they led through the challenges we can all relate to but are often unheard. Today's story comes from Kent Kramer, President and Chief Executive Officer at Goodwill of Central and Southern Indiana. Kent is a servant leader who uses his platform as an opportunity to enable others, whether it's in the community, with his team members, or at home with his 4 awesome children and beautiful wife. He has a passion for mentoring. He loves listening, learning, and helping others. From recent college graduates to somebody making a career transition to a person just trying to find their way in life, Kent has a gift for lifting others up. In this episode, you'll hear why Kent values truly getting to know his people, listening to their concerns, and building trust. Check it out.
Goodwill is we do a lot of different things, but we are a retailer. Retailing is kind of in my blood. I grew up in Muncie, Indiana, and my grandfather owned grocery stores. Now, he sold them before I became legal working age, but by the time I got my first job, it was in a grocery store. I did that for 3 years before going to Indiana State, and I knew that I really wanted to go into retail. So a lot of people may not know, or sometimes they look at different type jobs, and sometimes my friends were like, really? You want to go into retail? And do you know what kind of hours that is, and the inconsistency in schedule and all those things? I just absolutely loved it. Sam's Club, right out of Indiana State, moved to Missouri to start my training, and that was 29 years ago, and I haven't looked back. Enjoy that aspect and of retail, the merchandising and selling goods, and it's all great. But I also just love the people that are employed in retail, and many times there's a lot of resiliency in those folks, and just some incredible work ethic. And I've seen it. My career has taken me 11 years at Sam's Club, a couple of years at Kmart, and now 17 years at Goodwill. And now retail is just a piece of what I do, but it's still provided a really good foundation for where I'm at today.
Yeah, and it's a foundation that's shaped a lot of your leadership, isn't it? And really caring about people. I know that getting to know people at all levels in the organization is something that really defines how you show up as a leader. Tell us about a situation or a story that helped to shape that.
You just really described what drives me on a daily basis. And it's always been there, but it kind of solidified back in actually 1995. And I was a store manager for Sam's Club at the time. And I had just been transferred to Washington, D.C. So I ran the Sam's Club in Lafayette, Indiana. And I asked for a challenge, and they sent me 2 months later to Washington, D.C., and it was just a different environment. I hadn't worked in an urban environment like that ever. 2 weeks into the job, I discovered that the individuals in that store who had just gone through a merger with another organization and had acquired them had decided to go forth with a union campaign, and they started signing cards and whatnot. So, talk about a challenge. 25 years old, heading into you're in this new environment, and you've got a union campaign going on, and actually it was the first ever that kind of ended up being an actual election for Walmart. So there was there was a spotlight on me and that store and the people in that store. So a lot of lessons learned. But going back to your kind of statement there, as far as top to bottom, and I do learn and I listen. And in this particular case, I had about 300 employees in my store, and because of the union environment and knowing that we were going to an election, I had to get to know those folks really closely, and did that. And what I discovered was some fascinating people, and I can think back fondly on many of them, and they were just trying to figure out how to survive. Many of them were working 2 and 3 jobs, public transportation. They, living in neighborhoods that weren't the safest, and they were in truly survival mode. And it just gave me an appreciation. I hadn't grown up in that environment. I didn't see that environment in college. My first couple of years of professional experience, and I just gained this true appreciation for folks, and I've never forgotten that. And I really, to this day, appreciate and have empathy for individuals at all levels, no matter the case. And this was a case which probably some would say was kind of a heated environment. But I also looked at it as, man, they're just trying to take care of their families and trying to figure out what to do. It's just, I think often back, so many years ago, and when I talk to folks today at all levels, that it still resonates with me as far as kind of where folks are and where they want to be, and working towards that.
Yeah, so 300 people is a lot. How did you get to know people?
So I learned early on, one of the first things I learned at Sam's Club was this Walmart culture of MBWA. It was management by walking around. And, so I still use that today. We have 108 sites at Goodwill, and that's schools and stores and commercial sites and contract sites. And I absolutely love getting out and walking around and meeting people and learning about their obstacles, learning about their successes. And I can think back to the early 90s when I first came on with Sam's Club, and Sam Walton really spoke about this management by walking around. And I happened to be at a store in Fishers, Indiana, where he came, and he was just an expert at that, and genuine concern. And he listened, and I just think, man, if this guy, ultimately the richest man in the world, and has people that do things for him, if this is how he's learning and getting out, I just kind of have tried to emulate that for the years. So that's how I did it. It's much easier in a store where it's got 300 people and they're broken down by departments and they work different shifts. But any good leader gets to know as many of the folks that get the work done as they can, and I still do that today.
Yeah, what does that do? What did that getting to know folks, what did that do for you in that situation?
So in that situation, and I'm being sincere here, it's not why I did it. It's the way I Lafayette. It's the way I managed in Indianapolis. A benefit was people began to trust me because they saw that I was interested in, and also would advocate for them, and truly believe that people can sense that when you're being sincere. And when I would provide opportunities for them for advancement or opportunities to, a better shift or more hours, sometimes it'd be like, which side I'm on, right? I want the union to win this, and but ultimately, you get people to trust you. You win them over, and they will go to battle. They will work hard for you, and I saw that kind of like really happen there in Landover, Maryland, back in 1990, and I've seen it happen time and time again. If you get people, if you show them, if you're interested in their success, and you provide them opportunities, and you listen and you respond, they will follow you. And they've always kind of lived by that versus, what might be considered old style management, where, iron fist and you get things done through high expectations and demanding excellence. And I think you can do all of that without, kind of that old style of management.
Yeah, I think, a lot of leaders may have walked into that situation in Washington, D.C. with a here's what we're going to do kind of mentality. But you started asking a lot of questions. And I imagine you talked about it being heated. There was a lot of pressure. You were in the spotlight. So what did you do in those situations as you were gathering info and asking questions? I imagine you got information that was kind of tough to hear at times. And how would you handle those
those kind of moments.
Yeah, it was, and I paint this really nice picture right here, but there were times. So in a kind of a contested, heated union election process, you do have the union who has their goal of getting people signed into the union, and kind of their goal is to help lift them up from a salary standpoint, and there are times where it's difficult because they perceive you as management. They don't really know you as a person. So sometimes there's acquisitions and things that you have to kind of deal with. And believe me, I look at it from both sides. I still do.
Of course, yeah.
And can appreciate the value of unions, but at the same time, I was working for the organization. So I always just kind of go into it, everything I do, and this was no. I want to give my best. I want to do the best I can, and I want to do what's right. Sometimes it was like I needed to kind of step up and say, we didn't do our best here as an organization, and I had to bring things up from whatever it might be, from a benefit plan change that really negatively impacted employees, and I don't really blame them for being upset. We didn't give them notice or whatever it might be, or it might be an acquisition where I just had to say, come on, folks, that's not me. I would never do that. So trying to be straightforward and honest at all times has served me well as well.
Well, and as you started, that it is something, the getting to know people is something that drives your leadership day to day. So here we are in 2019, and we're not in 1995. Today you've got a cell phone with you everywhere you go. Technology is really driving the pace at which we work. And every single day I work with leaders who, use the excuse of, I don't have time to connect with that person. I'll talk with him or her later. I've got way too much going on. How have you, as the pace of change has increased, the pace of work has increased, how have you maintained that? Is it just so ingrained in you that it's natural? Have you thought about that?
I do, because as I've grown in the organization, I came on with Goodwill we had 24 stores. This was 2002, and I was the vice president of retail. So my job was to be out in the stores and managing that part of the business, and it was real easy to know all 24 store managers and assistants and many of the key players in each one of those stores, and I really enjoyed that. Well, as my career has grown and I became COO and ultimately CEO, and now we have 74 stores and 15 high schools and multiple contract sites where we do work and people throughout 39 counties in central and southern Indiana, it has gotten tougher, and it is. I can understand when you talk to those leaders that say they just don't have time, but I still make time. I don't get to sites as much as I would really like to, but I do keep track of which ones I go to, and I make sure I get into each one of them. I'm just very organized, and I've got an assistant that helps me keep really organized on that and keeps track of where I go and who I've seen. And so it takes a lot more organization these days, but I still carve out a pretty large portion of my kind of work life to make sure I get out in the field and I listen and I learn. And I guess I'm deliberate at doing that.
Yes, and you are someone who is always present with the people that you are with. Every conversation I've ever had with you, I've had an opportunity to see you at work, see you in volunteer settings, personal settings. And, every time I've had a conversation with you, I feel like you're really listening, you're tuned in, and, there's someone who's paying attention to what I'm saying, really cares about this conversation right now. That's such a gift.
Yeah. Well, it's, I'm an ENFJ, and so I'm an extrovert and I have feelings. So I absolutely love getting to know people. I've told people, I wish there was a job I'd just go out and just travel and and talk with people, but
but that's kind of what you get to do every day, isn't it?
I do. So I do kind of have my dream job in that sense.
Just connecting.
Yes.
So let's go back to 1995 and tell us how this all played out. You're in Washington, D.C. It's spotlights on you. You're getting to know people, obviously building trust. How did that all evolve?
A lot of people in business and in life, you have these like milestones and you remember things. So I do remember July 8th of 1995, and I remember the administrative law judge in the back of that store counting votes. And it was one of the most stressful times of my life because it's like worked really hard, and we felt very good, and I still do in that situation, that it was best for that population to kind of stay with the company, and there's lots of opportunities for advancement, opportunities to really grow your career, and a lot of those folks have. But I still remember it with that. I'm 88 to 52. Remember the votes of those who voted. The final call was 88 to 52, and it's so that was kind of like a sense of accomplishment. But when I think back about what I learned, it was really the relationships I gained. I was really close with that were part of that 52, and I don't fault them, and I don't think poorly about them. They felt that was was going to be best for them and their families, and just a lot of emotions back and forth thinking back to 1995. I just gotten married. We had our first child there in DC, and I'll just I do bring kind of my personal life into work, and I remember my daughter was born in February. We were in the heat of this union, and we were public faced, so union organizers could come in. I got to know all of them. They could come in and as shoppers, and it was just kind of almost like a circus type environment. But I had a kind of like guess the sex, guess the weight of my first child. It was union people involved in it, non-union people that on the 88 side, people on the 52 side, and they were all really excited when I came in and after she was born on February 4th. They were all wanting to know what's the details, and so it was probably the weirdest kind of union election for that union, and definitely for the company, because they're like, what is going on here?
It's the Kent Kramer style, is what that is. Personal and connective and real. So if you could go back, so I hear you saying a lot of lessons learned, clearly a focus on getting to know people. That's something you learned through that situation that's foundational to how you lead today. So if you could go back to 1995 and give yourself any advice, what would you give?
I saw success through treating people with respect, being honest with them, having open communication, following up on their needs, and getting back to people and answering questions, even if I didn't have it when they asked me. Being organized in the work I did, because back then, corporate or Walmart, really, they want to know, okay, what are you covering in these meetings, and what are you doing here? And it was trying to run a store and participate in this environment. They wanted to see everything. So, it's just kind of like a cadence of things that I do over the years, and just be as organized as possible for my people, no matter who those people are. So it's even today, there's lessons learned, and I've kind of carried that. Not that I didn't treat people with respect, or I just saw the value during those days, and I saw the benefit. And, if I can get people to find me, in that type of environment, if I can kind of continue this path forward, I know I can have success. And I've seen that over the years. And whenever, for whatever reason, I haven't been able to do that. And, I've always been a big fan of 360 surveys. And if I've ever, if somebody's questioned that, or I've seen that in a survey, I kind of recenter myself again. And the lessons learned in 1995, still using today in 2019, and still have a whole lot of value in those kind of early leadership lessons.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, your leadership philosophy is getting to know people, and that was grounded in you so early in your career is really interesting. Because I think about, you said you were 25 years old. And so I think I just thinking back about 25-year-olds entering the workforce. And I was in such I got to prove myself kind of place. Here you were in this really pressure driven situation, and you leaned into getting to know people. Like, where did that come from? When you reflect on how was that your mentality? Did somebody give you that advice? Where'd that come from?
So that's interesting. You say, Andrea, prove yourself. And I've always kind of lived with that thought in mind. And, back then, so it actually even happened in Indianapolis, and it was trying to get my first store, which was just really a year before then. I wasn't in Lafayette for very long before they moved me. But Walmart had this philosophy where they did this 360 survey for anybody that they were going to promote their store. And I knew that starting out, that I'd only been with the organization a couple of years, but they did this survey, and it was 10 questions, and it was all around the values of the organization. But the final part was comments. And Walmart took those comments to heart. And if you showed that you didn't treat people with respect and you didn't communicate well, and if that came out in your survey, then you had to wait. You had to wait until the next time around. And, so they really took that to heart. So I have always kind of like ingrained in me. And then through that union process that was ingrained in me, I do kind of lead with respect, and because people, I do have to prove myself, but I've got to prove myself to leadership, but I have to prove myself to those people that are, working hard every day, because those are the ones that are judging me. And I still think that today. I wear that kind of with the extreme now, because I can't get to every site as often as possible. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, these people tell me, oh, I haven't seen you in 6 months. I'm like, oh, I know, I'm trying to get it. So I do exactly what you said. I do my best, because I know people are watching me and looking at me.
Oh gosh, that's so many insights I'm taking away from this. I think the couple of key takeaways that you just reiterated over and over and over is the value in taking time to get to know people, and then listening to their concerns. And then I love the point you added just a moment ago. And then once you're clear on what their needs are, actually following up and doing something with that information, right? That's what it is that builds trust. So Kent, thank you so much for sharing your story. And thank you for your leadership with Goodwill and all of the things that you and the organization are doing in the community and beyond. If our listeners want to connect with you or learn more about the work that you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Well, there's lots of ways. So if they just want general information about Goodwill, our website is goodwillindeed.org. Also, you can find me on social media, and I'm on Twitter at Goodwill CAC, Goodwill KAK, and then also on LinkedIn at Kent Kramer under Goodwill. So I love sharing our stories, so you can see some of the incredible people that we work with and that are working hard to increase their independence and reach their potential. And I also really enjoy hearing from others.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast to never miss a Being at Work story.